everyone, and welcome back to All About Steph 1 with me, Steph. I hope you're all doing well. Today, this is something that I've been planning for a while and researching, but we're going to talk about how to become a Grade 1 FIA circuit, what it takes to become one if you're a Grade 2 circuit, the exceptions to the rules in the Grade 1 circuits, and everything in between. So stick with me if you want to find out a little bit more about it. There are a couple of articles in the description in case you want to go and look up some more yourself, and the links to the FIA website in case you want to go into extreme detail. But we'll just get straight into it with the definition of what a Grade 1 track is. And it is a track that has a weight-to-power ratio of less than 1 kilogram per horsepower. Now, in comparison to Grade 2, the Grade 2 track has a weight-to-power ratio of 1 to 2 kilograms per horsepower, so the cars can be a little bit heavier but not go as quickly. So the FIA has grades 1 through 6 to categorise its circuits, grade 1 being the only circuits that are capable of hosting Formula 1 races. Now, we do have a couple of extra ones in there, so grade 1T are tracks that are suitable for testing Formula 1 vehicles, grade 3E are circuits that are suitable for Formula E, etc, etc. But in this video, we are mainly going to focus on the grade 1 tracks. If you're a circuit, you can apply for any of these 6 licenses, but the higher the grade, so if you want to get a grade 1 or a grade 2, they're the most expensive licenses that you have to pay for. These licenses are valid for 3 years post the final inspection by the FIA. If you want to renew your license after 3 years, you'd have to have more inspections done, so it's in your best interest to maintain upkeep of the circuit to make sure that you would then be granted a license should you want one after the end of the first 3 years. Speaking of licenses and licenses being removed after 3 years, there are a few circuits who have lost their licenses at the end of the 2020 season, 2 of them which were supposed to be on the 2021 calendar. Now, those 2 were the Shanghai International Circuit in China and Circuit Gilles Villeneuve in Canada. China has currently been postponed and Canada has been cancelled, so neither of them actually need to renew their license just yet because they won't be hosting any Formula 1 races for the next year, likely. It's possible that China could host a race later on in the season, especially if we start to see a few issues arising like we have with Singapore being cancelled. So China could definitely renew their license, but with Canada, because the licenses are so expensive, it wouldn't surprise me to see Canada waiting until next year in 2022 to renew their license. I'm hearing a lot about Malaysia as well being added back onto the calendar to replace Singapore. This is likely not really possible because the license for Malaysia has run out and they have not renewed it yet. It is likely that Malaysia will not renew that license either because they are not currently hosting any Formula 1 races and there aren't really any prospects to be hosting Formula 1 races in the future. It's a very expensive license and it's almost not worth it to potentially be hosting a race in place of Singapore, especially in the current global climate where you don't know whether you will actually be hosting the race. So it's probably a smart decision for Malaysia to not have renewed that license as of yet, but hopefully Formula 1 will return there in the future. But enough about the circuits that don't have a license, and let's talk about the ones that do. So there are currently 37 circuits across the globe and 45 different layouts of those circuits that are suitable and that hold an FIA Grade 1 license. Firstly, let's start off with safety and let's talk about the med centre. You have to have a permanent medical centre, medical facility if you are grade 1 through 4. So that includes definitely the Formula 1 circuits. Now, you have to have 2 doctors who are proficient in being able to resuscitate someone, and you have to have 2 surgeons. One surgeon who is an expert in treating burn wounds and another who is an expert in spinal injuries / concussions or head injuries. One of the things that I think is more well known is the fact that you have to be located 20 minutes away from a suitable medical facility should a serious accident occur, so you have to be able to be driven there in 20 minutes on the road or be able to get there within 20 minutes in a helicopter. If the medical helicopter cannot fly and that is your only means of transporting someone to the suitable facility that is less than 20 minutes away, then the Formula 1 cars are not allowed on track, because if there were to be a serious accident and you couldn't get to a suitable facility in 20 minutes, then that would be in breach of the FIA's rules and in breach of safety. In addition, in terms of safety, there are no specific rules in terms of barriers, runoff areas, but you have to ensure that there are suitable amounts for whatever speed you are going at around the circuit. So Chain Bear did a fantastic video as to why we wouldn't be able to do Silverstone in reverse, and it just is because of the different speeds that we would be going, the runoff areas and the barriers just not being suitable. So if a circuit is hypothetically a grade 2 and wants to become a grade 1, then it's going to have to be careful that all of the runoff areas and the barriers are suitable enough for the speeds that a Formula 1 car would potentially be doing around the circuit. This is obviously a little bit different when Formula 1 goes to street circuits as well, because there aren't these huge amounts of runoff. So it is at the FIA's discretion whether there are sufficient amounts of runoff, whether the barriers are good enough, whether they will absorb the impact should a crash occur. That is all something that kind of comes with designing a specific track, and the FIA will then deem whether it is acceptable enough, whether it is safe enough. Another thing to mention before we get onto the actual track requirements is the fact that to host a Formula 1 race or to be a Grade 1 circuit, you have to be able to have the facilities and the spectator capabilities of bringing in the large crowds that come with Formula 1. So the facilities have to be up to scratch for the media, because the production, the circus of Formula 1 is absolutely huge, and a given circuit or track has to be able to cope with that when Formula 1 comes to visit, if Formula 1 comes to visit. There also has to be a suitable amount of room for the spectators. It has to be safe for anyone who does come to watch the circuits. I think that that's definitely an issue with some of the Grade 2 tracks. They don't have suitable facilities to bring Formula 1, and the facilities would definitely need a massive upgrade. It's definitely something we struggle with around street tracks as well. Where do you put grandstands? Where do you put a paddock? Where do you put all of these things that we need to make Formula 1 possible? But talking about street circuits, they do actually break a lot of the FIA rules when it comes to track requirements. So actually, let's just get straight on to track requirements and start talking about some of the exceptions to the rules. The first rule, the main rule that I think a lot of people are actually very aware of, is that you can't have a circuit that is shorter than 3.5 kilometers. Now, the other half of this rule I don't think people are as aware of, because I did mention this to some people and they were really confused, but it's that you can't have a circuit that is longer than 7 kilometers. Now, there are two exceptions to this rule. Number one is Monaco on the shorter end, and number two is Spa on the longer end. Monaco is 3.337 kilometers, which is just less than that 3.5 kilometer minimum, and Spa is 7.004 kilometers, which is just 4 meters longer than the recommended length of a Formula 1 track. There is a reason that it's these two circuits in particular that do break the rules, and that reason is because they are old circuits. They were created before these rules even existed, and therefore they are the only ones to kind of not abide by them. If we see any new circuits being built, there will not be any that are smaller than 3.5 kilometers or longer than 7 kilometers. The brand new circuit in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, that Formula 1 will be visiting later on in the year, that is now the second longest track on the calendar, and it is still just less than a kilometre shorter than Spa at about 6.1 kilometres. So it definitely demonstrates that any new circuits that the FIA or the tracks are conceptualising, they're not going to be any longer than 7 kilometres. Rule number 2 is that straights cannot be longer than 2 kilometers. Now, I'm not sure exactly why this rule is in place, but I'm assuming it will be something to do with picking up a huge amount of slipstream and requiring lots of corners in Formula 1 to actually create exciting racing. It also probably comes back to not having too long of a circuit, because the longer your straights are, the longer your circuit is likely to be, because the corners will feed into the straights. So Baku actually breaks this rule, and it is one of the longest circuits on the calendar. I think it's now the third longest now that Jeddah has been added to the Formula 1 calendar. So Baku has the longest straight. It is 2.2 kilometers. As we can see from the action that went down at the weekend, Baku's straight has a huge slipstream. You can get a huge advantage with a tow. That's how Charles Leclerc ended up on pole. The straight allowed the drivers to jump in the slipstream as well throughout the race and get overtakes done before DRS even opened. So that is definitely a benefit that you have with a really long straight, and I'm sure the FIA are trying to avoid that with every single track on the calendar. Rule number 3, the starting grid must be 15 meters wide and there must be 8 meters between each of the grid spots. I'm fairly sure Monaco breaks this rule just because of how narrow it is to begin with. I don't see how it could be 15 meters wide at the starting grid. I do believe that the grid spots are angled a little bit further backwards than the ones next to them, just to maintain that 8 meters apart, but Monaco probably does not have a width of 15 meters, and I could not find any information, so if you know, watching this video, how wide the starting grid is for Monaco, please let me know in the comments down below. This could definitely be a feature of a lot of other street circuits as well, because they are not permanent fixtures, therefore it's a little bit difficult to say the starting grid is going to be 15 meters wide. It's very difficult to see the roads as 15 meters wide sometimes. So that is definitely one where there are a few circuits that break the rules, but as long as the FIA has deemed it safe, then it's okay. Rule number 4. This one's a really interesting one, and it is that the first corner should be at an angle of 45 degrees with a radius of less than 300 meters. Most of the circuits actually do abide by this rule, and it is natural because you would like a harsher braking zone going into turn 1 to facilitate overtaking, especially on the opening lap. But the immediate exception that came to mind was Sochi in Russia, which has that kind of kink right as the first turn, and it's only when we get to the second turn that we see Rule 4 coming into play. That turn 2 corner at Sochi, the right-hander, is almost 90 degrees, so it definitely is more than 45 degrees that you would require on the first corner, but technically the first corner isn't actually the one that has a 45-degree angle, it's the second corner. This is a newer circuit as well, so the FIA has clearly looked past this and thought, the braking zone going into turn 2 is enough and you don't need that braking zone into turn 1. It's nice as well because the fans managed to see a little bit of a different start at Russia rather than another track where there is a massive run down to turn 1. The drivers are able to pick up a slipstream going down into turn 2 at Sochi, and that means that we could have a massive change in the lead of the race. So it's really, really interesting and definitely different to another track. So I'm not 100% mad about Russia breaking the rules. Rule number 5 is that the pit lane must be adjacent to the start-finish straight, so it must be next to it basically. All of the tracks seem to follow this rule, even Monaco, which has the weird pit entry and something that I still can't wrap my head around. So all of the circuits, the current circuits that we have, definitely abide by this rule, so must be an important rule for the FIA to have enforced. Rule number 6, and this is all about banking. So allegedly banking on a track should not exceed 5.7 degrees, but there are obviously some exceptions to this rule. So the Indianapolis Motor Speedway is a huge exception to the rule actually, because it is widely known that FIA does not grant a grade 1 license to ovals, and the Indianapolis Motor Speedway is an oval, first and foremost. However, that is besides the point. It still does hold an FIA grade 1 license, and it has a corner of 9-degree banking, so that is pretty high and a pretty huge exception. The biggest exception to this rule is Zandvoort, which I'm sure you were all thinking. Formula 1 was supposed to go there for the first time in decades last year in 2020, but this year will be the first year that, fingers crossed, we hopefully get to go there, and we'll see how well the banking works out. There is severe banking at turn 3 and turn 14. Turn 3 has a banking of around about 18 degrees and turn 14 has a banking of around about 19 degrees. So those numbers definitely exceed the recommended 5.7 degree banking that the FIA states. But the FIA has definitely carried out enough tests to demonstrate that the banking must be safe here, and it's a feature that we haven't really seen in modern day Formula 1, so it'd be really, really interesting to go to Zandvoort and see how the racing turns out. Honestly, those are all of the important track requirements. There are a lot of tiny little ones. For example, the width of the track needs to not change too dramatically, and the gradient of the track should be between 1 and 2 degrees. So there is a lot to consider when you are trying to design a track that will be used for Formula 1. But it's time to have a look at some of those grade 2 circuits and what can they do to become a grade 1 circuit. Well, it's really interesting actually, because there are a lot of interesting grade 2 circuits that we have actually raced at with Formula 1, but in the past. So clearly they're not suitable for modern day Formula 1. What I want to know is whether they could be suitable for Formula 1 again. A massive thing that a lot of fans have been calling Formula 1 to do is to return to Africa, and Kyalami seems like the best bet. There is a massive market for Formula 1 in South Africa, and this is a grade 2 circuit, so it is 100% doable with a little bit of TLC. The FIA have managed to sign off on 2 street circuits within the last 6 months, and that is Miami in the USA and Jeddah in Saudi Arabia. So with a little work between the FIA and the circuit organisers, there could definitely be an agreement reached where there is a little bit of updating and improvements that go on at the Kyalami circuit, and then potentially we could see Formula 1 race there if it is granted a grade 1 license. There are some great circuits in the Grade 2 category as well, including Autódromo Termas de Rio Hondo, which is in Argentina, Brands Hatch, Donington, which are both in the UK. Macau is currently in the Grade 2 circuit gang right now. So there are plenty of opportunities for a little bit of investment and a little bit of TLC to go into these Grade 2 tracks to see if we can make them Formula 1 worthy. So we've reached the end of the video. I hope you guys learned something new, because I learned a lot of new things while researching this one. As I said before, lots of articles in the description in case you want to go and check them out. Let me know if you can think of any other exceptions to the rules in the comments down below. But leave this a like if you enjoyed the video, and don't forget to subscribe if you have not already. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye!